The Blast from Our Past Network.
Hey everyone, co-host Corey here. I just wanted to take a quick second and say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. Without you, Podcasting After Dark would not be possible. If you would like to help the show grow, please consider signing up at patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. You can also support the show by purchasing one of our awesome t-shirt designs on our merch store at podcastingafterdark.com, or by picking up a copy of 7 Winters Alone by David Irons on paperback, hardback, or Kindle. Just search for 7 Winters Alone on Amazon or click on the link in the show notes. A free way to help out is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those reviews are huge for us and really helps get the show in front of new listeners. Again, thank you all so much for the love and support you've given us over these past few years. It really means the world to us.
Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura, a deep dive into underrated and unknown television shows from our youth. Cartoons, sitcoms, cop shows, and much more. Sit back and enjoy some nostalgic fun with TV Obscura.
All right, got my whiskey drink, got my water drink. Okay.
You got a lot of drink?
I'll always do, baby.
You got a side of drink? Was that the song you were singing?
I was referencing that song. Okay. Power Extreme! Oh, sorry. That was the wrong show. We're talking about another post-apocalyptic kids show about cybernetically power-suited enhanced heroes fighting cybernetically power-suited enhanced villains. That's right. We're talking about Captain Power. Power on!
Captain Power, he's a hero, gonna take Dr. Dread down to zero. Sorry.
Dr. Dread. Dr. Lord Dread. He dropped his Dr. monocle for a Lord monocle, but
he did.
I mean, I probably would too as well if I got those sweet upgrades. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this month's episode of TV Obscura. I'm 1/3 of the TV Obscura team. Corey, aka Sleazy C, joined with me as always are my two brothers from other mothers, Zach, the Total Snackhead Schaefer, and Diallo, the Armageddon Jackson. And this month, we have a big episode, one that we kind of we pushed a little bit from last month to give Diallo time to watch every single episode in the 22-episode series. But we are talking about Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. Boys, Diallo, what's up, my man?
What's up? How you guys doing? You guys are nerds, by the way.
We are? We are?
Yeah.
Zach, how's it going, my man?
In case you were wondering.
Good. I'm more like doy. Doy.
As I drink from my Marvel Comics mug.
Captain Power, he's the man.
With my TARDIS background.
Hook up with Pilot if he can.
Spoiler alert, he doesn't, unfortunately.
Spoiler alert.
And spoiler alert, Pilot might be the best character on the show. So we will, and maybe even the hero of the show. But we will get all up in that business with this discussion here. Guys and gals, this is going to be another one of our, I don't know what we call this, like feature breakdowns or feature discussions where we are only talking about Captain Power. We're not going to be discussing anything else with this week because all three of us felt that this show was worthy of full discussion and everything. We're going to be breaking down, as per usual, the pilot, or discussing, we don't usually break down. As per usual, we're going to be discussing the pilot, the finale, which is actually a two-parter, and an episode in the middle, which we figured out. Basically, we just decided to go with the highest IMDb rated episode. Thankfully, Diallo actually had a chance to watch the entire 22 episode run. So he's going to be filling in a lot of blanks because I actually have some questions. Like, Diallo, when did her helmet get upgraded? Like, when did the hell did that change?
I got all the answers, man. I got all the answers.
I love it. Thank you so much. So, Diallo will be handling the pilot, I will be handling the finale, and Zach will be handling...
myself.
Episode 14, Judgment.
Judgment, like Judgment Night?
Yes, that would
Judgment
be...
Day?
that would...
WWE Judgment Day?
Now, normally, we all talk about what Captain Power sort of meant to us and everything in the past. But we thought we'd kind of give you a little bit of backstory on the show first, so you sort of understand what it is we're talking about. And then we'll kind of have a freeform discussion about our history with it, and then we'll move into the episodes in question. So, really quick, Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future was a sci-fi action television series that ran for 22 episodes in Canadian and American syndication. The show was created by Gary Goddard, the director of Masters of the Universe movie, and Tony Christopher, and developed by Mark Scott Zickery, who wrote some episodes of Star Trek TNG, and also Friday the 13th, the TV series, as well as a lot of cartoons that we watched back in the day. And J. Michael Straczynski as a head writer.
Sorry, you sure it's not Goddard?
What did I say? Goddard?
You said Goddard.
Yeah, I think it's probably pronounced Goddard. I think you're correct. It's Goddard.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, he's the director of Masters of the Universe Canon's Masters of the Universe live action show, a movie. And by the time this show was greenlit, that movie had not tanked yet, so he still had some clout. A Captain Power toy line was produced by Mattel, and during each episode, there were segments that included visual and audio material that interacted with the toys. The technology used flashing lights and various frequencies to simulate the screen shooting back at the kid and their Captain Power toys, usually the vehicles. Kids had to shoot the correct indicators on the screen and dodge the other ones unless the Captain Power toy ejected from the vehicle itself. The general plot of Captain Power, the storyline, was set on Earth in the 22nd century following the Metal Wars, a cybernetic revolt that resulted in the subjugation of the human race by intelligent machines, led by Lord Dr. Dredd. I threw in the doctor. Captain Jonathan Power and his small group of guerrilla fighters oppose the machine forces that dominate the Earth. Now, that's a very quick sort of synopsis of the show, but this is one of those shows where the intro lays it all out for you. So I'm going to insert that for our listeners right here.
Power on. Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. Earth 2147. The legacy of the Metal Wars, when man fought machine and machines won. Biodreads, monstrous creations that hunt down human survivors and digitize them. Volcania, center of the Biodread Empire, stronghold and fortress of Lord Dredd, feared ruler of this new order. But from the fires of the Metal Wars arose a new breed of warrior, born and trained to bring down Lord Dredd and his Biodread Empire. They were soldiers of the future, mankind's last hope. Their leader, Captain Jonathan Power, master of the incredible power suits which transform each soldier into a one-man attack force. Major Matthew Hawk Masterson, fighter in the sky. Lieutenant Michael Tank Ellis, ground assault unit. Sergeant Robert Scout Baker, espionage and communications. And Corporal Jennifer, pilot chase, tactical systems expert. Together they form the most powerful fighting force in Earth's history. Their creed, to protect all life. Their promise, to end Lord Dredd's rule. Their name, Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future.
So unfortunately, bad time slots, declining sales in the toys, and the fact that each episode cost about $1 million a piece all contributed to the show not being renewed for a second season, even though scripts were written and like a Commodore 64 game was lined up and everything. So They were planning on pushing this forward, but it just didn't turn out that way. Before we get into our general discussion, Zach, would you like to walk us through the notable cast and crew on this thing?
Yes, this phenomenal cast. Oh my goodness. Well, let's start at the top with Tim Dunigan, who plays Captain Jonathan Powers. I would say he's one of the few actors in this. He's one of the few actors in this that does not have a huge resume. He's made guest appearances on 90210. But not much more, like little things here and there, nothing too notable. But of course, he plays Captain Jonathan Powers. Would you say he has the makings of a sweet mullet? Like he's got the beginnings of a mullet.
He actually, I think he was the original face on A-Team, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but for like the original pilot, but he got replaced.
Wow, well that's fun.
I could have just made that
sure.
completely up, but that's like in the depths of my memory. I didn't actually look that up before we started recording.
Well, he's listed in the credits as Templeton, and not the rat from Charlotte's Web. But yeah, he was on A-Team for a minute, so Yeah,
he got replaced by.
Let's just say
got replaced by Starbuck. So.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
wow,
yeah,
nice.
You're right. I just looked it up. Yeah, he was the first face man.
First face man. Wow, that's pretty rad. Playing Major Matthew Hawk Masterson is Peter MacNeill, or as I like to say, if you look at his IMDb photo, David Crosby's stunt double, because he looks just like David Crosby in his IMDb picture. I would say Peter MacNeill is probably the most successful of the entire cast. He's got the largest filmography at like 214 movies and television shows, all over the place, from classic 80s movies to, he's working to this day on a show called Moonshine, which looks like it's a comedy series and probably set up in Canada. I'm speculating, but he's a Canadian actor. He's been in a ton of David Cronenberg films like Crash and History of Violence and all sorts of things. He's been all over the place. Literally, this is a guy that like you would recognize. Oh, he's on The Good Witch. Oh, he's on The Border. Oh, he's on The Secret. You keep going and going, and then you get all the way back to the 80s in movies like, he was in My Secret Identity. He was in War of the Worlds, and of course, Captain Power. This is probably his biggest role to date, though.
Oh, it's absolutely his biggest role. And you can tell, especially in the finale, he does a lot of emotional work in the finale. So you can tell his chops were a bit stronger than maybe, say, Sven-Ole Thorsen?
Well, I tell you what, though, Sven-Ole Thorsen is, who also, a.k.a. Lieutenant Michael Tank Ellis, has got a pretty large filmography as well, over 100 shows and movies he's been in.
A.k.a. LaFours from Mallrats. He has 2 confirmed
AKA
kills.
You know how many times I said LaFours watching this just because you always said it whenever we were watching anything?
Dude,
LaFours.
We're watching Gladiator and you're like, LaFours.
Duncan Luffy will always be LaFours to me.
I'd say he did a pretty darn good job, though, considering he's, known for mostly his stunt work and, big, heavy bad guy roles.
He gets a lot of screen time in this. He's one of the main characters in every episode. Yep. He's featured just the same as anybody else.
He's in every single one, all 22. Another actor who has a pretty substantial filmography is Maurice Dean Wint, who plays Sergeant Robert Scout Baker. I recognized him originally from the movie Cube.
Oh, yeah.
The indie film.
Mm-hmm.
If you've never seen Cube, it's worth watching. He's I'm like, why does this guy look so familiar to me? And then when I'm watching Captain Power, and I'm like, oh, that's the dude from Cube. Nice.
Yeah, that's a good movie. That's a really good fucking movie. I haven't seen it since the 90s, but I loved it back in the day.
Yeah, y'all should watch that. Jessica Steen plays Corporal Jennifer Pilot Chase.
Look at Corey's face.
I mean,
oh man, loved her.
yeah, I bet you
He's
did.
cheesing right now.
Bet you did. I mean, she's another one who's had a notable career. She's still working to this day, and she's been on everything from Grey's Anatomy to Stargate SG-1. Better than the movie.
Yes, we were just talking about that, Zach. Yeah,
we sure were. Would you agree, Diallo, that Stargate SG-1 is better than the movie?
No comment.
Would you agree that it's better than Armageddon? I'm kidding. But she was in Armageddon.
Yeah,
though.
she was in Armageddon. Yeah.
She was in Herman's Head. I mean, she's been in a lot of things.
in Armageddon, was that Diallo? Was she one of the ones that like piloted, but then
Yeah,
the
she
ship
was-
got exploded?
She was
or
the pilot. Yeah, she actually. I think she made it through the whole thing. I think her
Okay.
name was Jennifer Pilot. Also, in that movie, I believe. Yeah.
You're right. Her name was Jennifer in
Yeah.
it, and she was the
Actually,
pilot. Yeah.
so yeah, I saw that Michael Bay actually cast her because he was a fan of Captain Power.
Oh, that's cool.
Are you being serious?
I'm serious. Yeah. One of the in some of my research, I remember coming across that. It was the guy that I told you that couldn't pronounce Michael J. Straczynski's name right.
Yes, yeah.
Right. David Hemblin plays, of course, Lord Dredd, and he is known for, well, he was in the Rollerball remake that came out in 2002. Never saw that, but I love the James Caan version, original movie, Rollerball. Maybe that's why I didn't see the Rollerball remake. I'm like, why are they remaking Rollerball? Just remake Solar Babies.
He was also in Earth Final Conflict, which we discussed
Yes.
way back in the day.
Yeah, he was Jonathan Dors.
Right. And if you've never seen Brain Scan is a pretty decent horror science fiction movie with Edward Furlong and Frank Langella. I kind of like that movie. Did you ever see Brain Scan?
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I can see the antagonist, the creature, whatever the hell it is, in my head.
It's kind of good.
Okay, all right.
It's kind of good. It came out during that techno phase of like Lawnmower Man and
Yeah, I always.
Oh, gosh.
Like, and it came out at the same time as like Strange Days came out and stuff like that, and
yeah, and there was another movie that came out with what's her face from Raiders of the Lost Ark and Karen Allen.
oh, okay.
Like not similar to Brain Scan, but it's just like that techno neo horror,
Yeah.
I guess you could say, right? Yeah. So, anyways, David Hemblin. I don't know. Well, I'm gonna go over some of the voices because they were featured in so many of the episodes. Derek Hazel with no IMDb photo. Damn it. He is the voice of Sauron. And I mean, he's actually been in 12 things. He was in Top Cops. Diallo, do you remember Top Cops?
No.
Wasn't that the musical? The musical cop
was
show?
that? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Top Cops.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. And he played
no,
Mr.
that
Romero.
wasn't. That was a different show. I know exactly what you're talking about. But that was not the musical cop show.
Cop Rock.
Cop Rock.
Rock
That's
is-
it. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, what the hell is Top Cops then? Because maybe we need to do that show.
I can tell you, IMDb, according to IMDb, Top Cops is police officers throughout North America narrate dramatizations of interesting adventures that have happened to them on the job.
Oh, that sounds not fun to break down and discuss.
No.
Okay, never mind.
No. So it sounds like it's almost like a proto cops show, like, you know.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Oh, fine. Ted Dillon plays Overmind. And Ted Dillon has been in, he's had a pretty decent career as well. He's been in over 109 movies and TV shows. So that's a damn good run for an actor.
Oh, yeah.
Blastar, played by John S. Davies. Again, a voice actor, not a huge career, but still, nevertheless, I enjoy listening to Blastar's voice. And Bruce Gray, who plays Mentor / Dr. Stuart Power. Actually, he was in Starship Troopers. He was in Cube Part 2, and he's been in over 180 movies and television shows.
Oh, he was the Sky Marshal in Starship Troopers. Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
Pretty cool. We'll get to other actors in the cast that were in the episodes that we discussed. And if we don't, if you go into IMDb and look at the casting list, there are going to be some people in there that you'll recognize and a whole lot that you won't.
Yeah, and just real quick, some notable writers that worked on the show: J. Michael Straczynski, Diallo. Please inform people as to why this particular writer matters to this show.
He is what made the show have the depth that it had. He went on to write basically almost every episode, I think, or something of Babylon 5. That's what I think most people might know him from. He wrote a ton of really great comic book series. He wrote Rising Stars, which is just a dear to my heart series. He had a really, to me, incredible run on Spider-Man. It's actually a highly controversial run, but he's the one that kind of made Peter Parker's identity open to Aunt May. And towards the end of his run, it wasn't too great, but he did a really good job. So he's been writing comic books and stuff for years. I think actually, again, in my research, I found out the show was going to Mark Zickery, and he ended up being too busy to work on the show a lot. So then he hired some guy named Michael J. Straczynski.
And Mark Zickery is notable because he worked on a lot of cartoons that we watched back in the day too and have covered on TV Obscura, like Galaxy High. We covered that. Bionic 6, we covered that. Centurions, which of course has a very strong tie to this thematically. He worked on Pole Position. He worked on the Mighty Orbots. So the pedigree and the writing on this show is fantastic. And of course, J. Michael Straczynski also worked on the real Ghostbusters, and so did Mark Zickery as well. So they probably kind of worked together there. And like I said, he also worked on the Friday 13th, the TV series, which I think we will be bringing that to TV Obscura one day, probably October.
Oh, we have to.
Yeah.
That's we got to pair that up with Freddy Krueger's Nightmares.
Yeah. Freddy's Nightmares, yeah. And of course, Jason's bedtime fantasy story.
I was about to say, what?
For kids. I also really want to point out in the cast that Graham Greene and Laurie Holden from she's on The Boys now, but I think a lot of people might recognize her from The Walking Dead at one point. But Graham Greene, of course, huge, amazing actor, and David James Elliott, who played Jag, I believe.
Oh yeah.
Those three were a few notable guest stars, quote unquote. I'm just still getting over the fact that Hawk looks like David Crosby in his IMDb photo.
He really does,
and really weird to me, and kind of cool. Rest in peace to David Crosby.
Yeah, big rips to David Crosby.
The Smoking Man too, right?
We're gonna get to him. We'll get to him when we cover Judgment.
So let's have our discussion about what this show meant to us growing up and what our experience was with it. Zach, you kick us off, and then Diallo, you go second, and then I'll round it out.
I mean, this show was everything to me when I was a kid. I was obviously a huge toy fanatic, and the action figures I remember not being that expensive. The vehicles was another story. They had jets and they had power-up stations, and they did have an actual fort or like command center base that I never saw in the wild, but I have seen it on. There's a fun Facebook Captain Power group that actually the actors are a part of as well. Some of the I think Captain Power himself, Tim Dunigan, is on there too. And people will show some of the toys that they've collected over the years, and one of those being the base. I never had the weapons. The weapons looked really cool too, but I had all the figures. And I love the fact that they actually made a female figure as the pilot. My only complaint was that two things. Well, my only two complaints were, one, the helmets didn't cover their faces like they did in the show, and two, I would have liked to have removable helmets. So like you see all these generic looking faces on all the figures. If they made them now, they would look a lot more detailed, I'm sure. And way back when, it was pretty decent for what we had back in the day. But the toys were rad, and I loved that it was interactive. I loved Photon, obviously, and Captain Power was like a nice compliment to that, with like interacting with the TV, shooting at the TV. I thought that was so cool. And I remember the stories of like Captain Power being too violent for kids, and like, what do you mean? I mean, it's not any more violent than G.I. Joe and Transformers. What? Because I can shoot the TV, I'm gonna, it's a threat suddenly. But I loved it. I love the show. I didn't watch every episode because, like we've talked about on this show before, if you missed a week or you missed a day, you're screwed. You're like, well, I'm never seeing that episode ever. But I love the show, and to this day. So when you guys proposed doing it, I was like, yeah, let's do it. I love me some Captain Power.
Power on. Diallo, what's your experience with the show before this?
So I remember it. I used to watch it. I don't. It was so funny watching all these episodes. I don't even really remember watching it every weekend. I don't know what I was doing or why I didn't watch it every weekend, or if I watched them all and just forgot about everything. But again, I was in high school at the time, so I was like a little, I was at that age where I was like, at least from the outside world, I was too old to be watching, that kind of stuff, but I still watched it anyway. But my brother is much younger than me, and for Christmas, I remember he got the Captain Power ship. And so I remember, playing with it, with the TV show, for a little bit, and it was actually pretty terrible. It wasn't like it wasn't a very good system. I thought, like, the ship and everything looked cool, but just the way it interacted with the TV was a little haphazard. So I don't know that I engaged with it with the gun ship that they had for much longer. But I did watch it, and then I remember. The only thing I remembered when I was watching this was the finale, and that we'll talk about it. But I just remember kind of being confused because because the way episodes come out, they bounce all around, so you kind of don't know what's going on. But I knew that was like the end of that season or whatever, but just what happened was just so like shocking, and I was like, is this real life? Oh my God, and then it went away. Never watched it again till now. So
until you watched the entire thing.
I mean, I wanted to watch the entire thing just because like it has such prominence in my mind about a time in my life, but I didn't really remember it. But I do remember it kind of like doing things with storytelling, and at that time that wasn't being done anywhere, like, the finale. And with my older brain, I really wanted to kind of go in and actually see the kind of things that they did. And it's pretty fascinating how it evolved over time. So, yeah.
And since you did watch the entire series, we're going to look to you to interject any knowledge in our discussion with the episodes, because that's when we're really going to dig into the nitty-gritty of the show, talking about these technically 4 episodes, but the finale's a 2-parter. And then you have, Diallo, I know you watch like Scouts. You want to talk about like Scouts sort of backstory and stuff like that. So we'll get into all of that when we start getting into the show itself. I'm very similar to, I guess, both of you all. Zach, in the fact that I had all the toys. I actually had the jet thing, Captain Power's jet thing. I did not have Lord Dredd's cannon, whatever that was. I never liked it. I didn't really care for it. But I had the jet, and it came with a VHS, like an animated story, completely animated, and the animation, if I remember correctly, was fantastic. Like I think it was Japanese animation or, one of those kind of studios. But the animation was really good. I remember playing with it. Diallo, like you, I was never terribly impressed with the technology of the laser and stuff. And I watched the show, but even though I had the toys, I didn't like sort of engage the show in that regard. I didn't kind of like play the toys while I watched the show. I just watched the show, which is funny because that's not how they sort of intended it. But also, like you, Diallo, the finale is burned into my memory. And as a kid, I remember talking about it, being like, did this happen? Did you guys see this? And because the show, I think, aired on 8 a.m. on Sundays, famously, this around the same time slot later that Starship Troopers, the Roughneck Chronicles cartoon wouldn't have it. It's just that death time slot, early morning on a Sunday. For me, that time slot's always for Hanna-Barbera. I've always watched Hanna-Barbera on a Sunday morning, never anything else.
And Davy and Goliath.
Yeah. But it became stuff of legends. But I did watch a lot, although, when we get into our episode discussions, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know Pilot's backstory. I didn't remember that, the bad guys also had, humans working with them and stuff like that. Yeah. Actually looking like sort of like Hitler SS youth type of thing and everything. I'm like, man, there's a lot happening in this show that was completely over my head as a kid. I'll say that for fucking sure.
And I'll add into that as well. Yeah, the technology was not very thought out, interactive wise. The kind of glowing chest plates that the villains had, or these random little dots throughout that you could fire on in the credit sequence of the show at the end. It didn't translate very well to what they were doing. It was a cool concept on paper. I'm sure on paper Mattel was like, this is a winner. Side note, I watched this with Bodhi, and I also watched this with friend of ours who's a 16-year-old kid who actually loved the show, he's like, this is better than some of the stuff that's on TV now, and thought the technology was not bad. He's like, that's a really cool idea. It's too bad that it didn't work as well as they promised it would, The commercials sure did sell it really well, though. If you look at the old Captain Power commercials on YouTube, you're like, whoa, this stuff is going to be amazing. And they were like, oh, he just shoots out of his cockpit. Big deal.
Now, I will say the toys did interact without the show. So, you could actually, fire at each other and have...
Against each other.
And that, I think, works better than having it, against the show and everything.
That was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, too, the figures, it was nice to have an assortment of figures that they released, and I guess they're going to continue a second wave, but it all got thrown down the trash bin.
Yeah, I really liked my Lord Dread toy because he came with the soft goods cloth cape and everything.
Yeah,
and it just good detailing on his cybernetic arm. Also, good motion. They weren't quite as many joints as G.I. Joe, but more joints than the Star Wars 3 3/4 figures. And as far as the designs go, the Captain Power ship, I still think it's a solid design. I think it's a gorgeous looking, just vehicle. I think I actually think, and this is one of the few times that this actually translates this way, I think the toy design looked better than the TV version of their flying vehicle.
Yeah, agreed. I think Reaction should take note with the playability of these figures, the joints. Just put a little action in their elbows, a little action in their knees. That's all you got to do.
All you got to do, give us something. For
$25,
Yeah.
Jeez.
I know. So guys and gals, Captain Power kind of as a property branches off in two directions. I mean, they combine, but it branches off into the toy line and branches off into the TV show. And we will kind of at this point just pretty much talk exclusively about the TV show and the merits on its own and everything like that. But just know you can go out there and check out the toys and everything. They're really fucking cool looking, and I think really sold the show. But clearly not well enough to have it hit a second season. But Diallo, are you ready to kick it off with the pilot episode? It's called Shattered. And I know you said that there might not be a lot to talk about here, but I have a lot to say about this episode.
All right.
So kick it off, baby.
Yeah, so it's the name of the episode is called Shattered. The description is, and I think it's technically a little bit wrong, but I'll read it. Captain Power receives a because I'm an expert now. See, after watching,
Yeah,
Well,
you are.
no,
You are.
after watching
really quick,
22
Diallo,
episodes,
before you read this, Diallo, I'm back you up 100%. IMDb sucks with their descriptions of shows. They really do.
Yeah.
So please, because I'll have the same to say about mine as well.
Okay, and real quick, Diallo, sorry, I'll cut in right now. Guys and gals, I caused this to happen. I made the mandate to read the IMDb description before and then elaborate as you see fit. So guys and gals, please blame me, Corey, for the IMDb description readings.
No, blame IMDb.
Diallo, it's all yours, my friend.
I just have mine is just like tiny nitpick, but anyways, I'll read it. Captain Power receives a transmission from Athena, an old flame from before the invasion. Entering the ruins of San Francisco to meet her, he finds the reunion less than friendly. So my only thing is that she's not from before the invasion, because the invasion happened long before they would have even had met. The armor wars happened so
Diallo, by the way, props for calling it the armor wars.
I slipped.
That was my era of reading Iron Man back then. That was late 80s, early 90s, the Armor Wars.
Yeah,
good one, buddy.
That was a classic. But yeah, anyways, that was it was a tiny nitpick, but I was like, you guys, that's not, because I'm an expert now, and so I know everything about Captain
IMDb
Power.
sucks.
But yeah, so it opens up with what's his name, Scout, and this is probably the most action he gets the entire series. Actually,
The most action?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The only other time he gets anything close to action is when there's another black actress on, and he gets kind of interested and paired with her. But he's kind of breaking into this this base. He's got camouflage technology, so he makes himself look like one of the dread robots. What are they called? Dread drones? Anyways.
Biodrome? No. Oh, yeah, no. The big ones are the biodromes or something like that. I think they're just like grunts, like robots or whatever.
Yeah.
So he disguises himself as one, sneaks into this base, starts planning charges, but then he gets locked inside. And then Captain Power and the crew are on the outside, and they just need to break open the door so he can escape. And it's very it's just basically set up to show you that this is a show that you can use your spaceship to shoot all the things on the screen, because it's just a big fight scene. And Scout escapes, and it's very dramatic. There's an explosion. Then they head back to their base, and then they receive a call, or there's a communique that that they intercept. Scout intercepts from an Athena, and there's an element of I think I don't remember if it was this part or a bit later, but there's an element of chess to it.
Yeah.
And little things that I didn't notice this when I watched the first episode, then I watched the whole series, then I actually went back to watch this one again to prep, and I noticed that they started setting up Captain Power and Pilot's little star-crossed lover thing in this episode. Is super subtle. Yep. But he starts telling them about this person, Athena, and apparently it was she used to work with his father, and he kind of alluded to there being some kind of romantic involvement. He didn't really go into it, and Pilot's what's going on with that,
How close were you?
Yeah. So they fly, he and Pilot fly to this they find a beacon or whatever in San Francisco. They fly out there to this old bookstore that they used to go to. almost immediately she shoots Captain Power. Him and Pilot had split up. Pilot hears a noise and she gets like knocked out by some gas. Anyways, it turns out that this Athena person had actually been digitized by Sauron. And that kept trying to keep that name straight in my head because it was like Sauron from the comics or Sauron from Lord of the Rings.
Soar
Yeah, like
dash
soar
on, but even
yeah.
soar
Yeah.
on.
And wasn't
Fightor.
that the pterodactyl looking
Yeah,
mofo from Marvel?
Yeah, from Marvel. Yeah, from
Yeah.
comics. Yeah, so I get every
Okay.
time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
And
he
the
was from the
X-Men.
Savage Land.
Yeah.
He had like he was a humanoid, but he had like a pterodactyl head and he could fly.
Yeah.
I never cared much for him, but his name was
alright.
Sauron too. I think this guy's a robotic homage to that character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it turns out that she had been digitized by Sauron and she was released so that she could bring in Captain Power. And apparently when you're inside the robot realm, like she goes into it and it's like torture. All of her memories are exposed, everything she believes in and cares for. So she comes out and she's kind of like, I don't want to go back. So I think she was going to like kill him instead of let him get captured.
Yeah.
And then Sauron appears before she could do that. And then Pilot had called the rest of the crew and let them know it was a trap. So they pop in right before everything goes crazy. There's another big fight so that you can shoot your guns. They destroy, or they like knock out Sauron or whatever. They escape. And then they go back to the base and Pilot's kind of lingering around because she still wants to know what's up with these two people. And then they end up playing chess at the end, and that was it. So that it was really just kind of like, it was very basic and simple, and it was just kind of, I think, just to kind of set up the general, like, we're going to have these standalone stories, but everything is framed to have fight sequences so you can play with your toys, and they pretty much did that. But the sort of like the depth of character and drama that they had in this was like out of the gate was a sign of things to come for the rest of the show.
Yeah, they do a lot in 22 minutes in this episode. Like you said, Diallo, the first 10 minutes are like them attacking that base. Some things I noted. One, had some pretty good matte paintings, or just good miniature photography. I know that volcano place is a miniature, but it looked to me like the first place, the base they went to, there was a shot that looked like a matte painting. I was like, it looked pretty damn good. Also, I noted that there was a decent amount of bad guy soldiers on the screen at the same time, and it actually looks like it gets upped later in the series. So they had to have multiple suits designed and everything like that. And then, like, the second half is the part with Athena, and they pack in so much emotion with her. Unfortunately, she's not credited on IMDb, so I don't know who she is, but she's acting at an 11, and which I think is okay for this, because I know this is kind of a kid's show. Even though it's a kid's show that really does not talk down to kids whatsoever, and I think it actually does a good job respecting the kids, being able to handle shit. But the fact that, they're in 15 minutes, they're dealing with Athena telling her horrific story about being digitized, and you're like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. And then you can see the trauma on her, just like her face and how she's acting. And then the fact that she wants to kill Captain Power, even though her she was tasked with bringing him in, but she wants to kill him so he doesn't have to fucking suffer the same thing she did. I'm like, this is some heavy shit. And then, you kind of expect her to probably die at the end of the episode, but she doesn't. They bring her back to the base and everything, although she doesn't really sort of go past this episode, although Diallo could probably...
No, this is the last time I think we see her, yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of cool. So, like you said, Diallo, I think this episode does a good job of setting up the fact that it's gonna be heavy, and things are gonna come at you that you might not expect, but also there's a lot of fun action in it. And also, everything is going to be a set. Whether we're outside or not, everything's a set. And I personally kind of love that. So this was a fun episode for me. Zach, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think Athena's trauma is forever immortalized in the intro to the show. So she'll have that going for her moving forward.
Yeah, so real quick, guys and gals, it seems to me the digitization, it isn't for everybody. Like, they'll kill most people, but then some people they'll actually digitize, and that kind of, it brings them into it, a la Tron, like into the robotic, person. So, yes, and Zach, you are correct. In the intro, you see her getting digitized, and it's one of the more intense ones because she's like screaming and shit.
Yeah, it's pretty violent. Is the bookstore? I think the bookstore is called City Lights, and that's a real bookstore up in San Francisco. I think it's actually still around, which is pretty cool. So, so right there I was like, oh, that's cool. Real places, real locations. I love that. Yeah, that based on, I know Corey said that the budget was pretty high for this show. I mean, I could see why, but at the same time too, I felt like I was watching, Doctor Who, Blake Seven inspired science fiction where you were like, reusing sets throughout this thing and reusing costumes and stages and whatnot. That I'm totally fine with that. I thought it looked great. Thought it looked really cool. I thought the opening where Scout is going in and taking out all the drone, like kind of grunt robots, it reminded me of Aliens a little bit, of like going into the base in Aliens, like oh, this is what would happen if they turned all the lights on in the base, and it was kind of like the cheaper set version of it. I thought it was a cool setup. The intro to the show is literally the pilot for every. It's the pilot, basically, just sets you up for everything you're going to see moving forward. So even if you watch this show at episode 10, you'd still know what was going on. Yeah, I thought everything was really good. I thought the drama was way more sophisticated for kids. Like, knowing that this was geared towards kids was just from the get-go. I'm like, yeah, no, I think they missed the mark in the fact that this probably would be better suited for kids like 10 and up. I think, not for like 6 and 7 year olds who just want to shoot at the TV, and I don't think the plot would go way over their heads. I love it now though.
And I think you're actually hitting the nail on the head too. Diallo, in your research, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this show was developed first, and then Mattel sort of kind of had this idea for the technology there, and it kind of was sort of serendipitous that they kind of were merged together. But the show, I think itself, was developed for an older, but still kids, but an older kid audience originally.
Yeah, it seemed like it was kind of like in conjunction with. I did read or see that Goddard, he direct Masters of the Universe. Did we talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think when I watched it said that he had developed a relationship with Mattel, and at the time He-Man sales were going down, and I think he just wanted to like have a new line of toys, and Mattel, they already had like He-Man, and then there was something else. He wanted to do something in the future, and so that's kind of how it all came about.
And they were already developing the light technology, the TV light technology, and then they were like, let's use that here, essentially.
Yeah, I don't really know about that part. I don't know about that part specifically, but I do know one real quick thing is about the sets though, because they all look the same. I did see that they built a huge warehouse to shoot a lot of the show, so that's why a lot of the sets
cool.
Look the same sometimes. They all have that same kind of feel. Yeah.
They also built like a lot of vehicles too that you see in the show that are clearly just made for the show. Like in the episode we're gonna talk about next, there's like this weird tank thing, and I mean, I can see why the budget was $1 million a piece for these episodes.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you gotta, again, hats off to the fact that they're like, I'm still blown away that there's a technology that's, well, I guess it's reading the signal off of the light or whatever. I just think that's kind of cool. It's on paper, again, it's cool on paper.
Yeah.
Execution-wise, not so good.
Yeah, and guys and gals, if you've never ever seen this, just know that the enemies, the bad guys, are all wearing these chest plates that kind of remind me of Zach, that toy line with
Visionaries.
Thank you.
Knights of the Magical Light.
Yeah, so
Visionaries. Magical powers take flight.
so they have like a chest area that is like it give you epileptic seizure. It's like flickering, So
It was giving me convulsions.
I know it's kind of rough.
I'm not joking. I was like, why my eyes feel weird watching this right now.
So I've had this DVD box set for years, and I was I always kind of pop in a new show to sort of fall asleep to. One night I tried falling asleep to this, and I just woke up with the whole room flickering,
Yeah.
and I'm like, nope, can't do Captain Power. But before we move on, guys, let's discuss the CGI in this show real quick, because I don't think we can, we can't let it pass. For me personally, I think the set designs are great. I think the costume designs are superb. I love all the characters, and I love all of their designs. And I don't think they look terribly cheap for a TV show. But what's really going to hold this show back from future audiences is the CGI that the Biodreads use, which are these two main enforcers for Lord Dredd, Sauron and Blastar. And it's pretty bad. Now, I know the three of us, we're all cool with letting shit slide from this era and everything. We get it. I mean, it's pretty damn impressive that we have a fully realized CGI characters in 1987. That's pretty damn impressive. And Sauron has a lot of personality. Actually, Blastar does too. They do
Blastar, yeah.
They do a great job of giving these two characters pretty good personalities. But they look pretty bad. So just be aware of that going into it. Diallo, what do you think? How do you think they hold up now?
I mean, I don't think it holds up now. But to me, again, I'm not the person to necessarily ask about that question because, again, the review that I watched, the guy just went in on the special effects, but I just was kind of like, I mean, it was 1987. Like, I don't, what do you want from me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that end of story for me. Like, so comparing that to now, there's just no way you could tell like things were going to advance that far. Like, at the time, that was just mind-blowing. Like, I mean, like, because I don't think the special effects from The Last Starfighter hold up. But
no.
Yeah.
No.
The CGI in that don't.
No.
I actually think they're pretty on par with this.
They are on par with
because it. I mean, it was
It's the
so
same.
rudimentary at the time, and like, I think if you understand that was like what we were like capable of, you don't like necessarily hold that against it. But everybody's different, So yeah.
If anything, I was impressed with the amount of screen time they gave Sauron and Blastar.
Yeah, there was some towards the end. There was some stuff with Blastar that was actually pretty, like the way he was moving and stuff he was doing. But yeah, obviously it was pretty rudimentary. But whatever. Like even when I'm doing Battlestar Galactica, and even when they did the Cylons on there at the time, it was 2004, 2003. I mean, it was a little like. It wasn't quite ready for prime time.
Yeah.
And that was however many years later, 20 years later. So just everybody stand down.
I think you hit the nail on the head comparing it to Last Starfighter, because it is exactly the same. It looks like you're looking at two different things at times. Like you're looking at, it was like in Doctor Who when they would shoot in video versus film, and you're like, whoa, it's a little jarring. So technology-wise, it was not there yet. I kind of like with the light technology with the toys. I appreciate the effort. Where I will give it credit is the interaction with the CGI with the actors. The actors are really good. All of the actors act really well. the exception of one, sort of, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think the main core characters are all trained, very good actors. So they're interacting with these, nothing there probably. And they're doing a pretty damn good job with these with the CGI. So, yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's not ready yet, but you know what? God bless them for trying.
And I know we'll get the Bodhi rating later, but what was Bodhi's take on did the CGI bother him at all, or?
That was the first thing he said was, "Oh God, the CGI is so bad." I said, "Yeah." I said, "But what do you think about the sets?" He's like, "They're pretty cool." Like he thought that was, he's got a sophisticated palate. I think I respect his opinion on things, and he's like, it's just so bad. I'm like, I know, bud, it is pretty bad, but this was 1987 and this is all new. He's like, okay.
Yeah, I just feel like when it comes to special effects, people they have the shortest memory, and like they just don't. I don't know. It's like they're entitled isn't the word, but they just, I don't know. It's just kind of like.
Well, I will say, like, my pushback on people who were like, oh, it's the first time they use CGI in Last Starfighter. To this day, and I think all three of us have had this discussion, they should have gone with practical effects. And I've always been a practical effects guy, even when they did CG in the 90s, in the 2000s, and because it's like, oh, we got to do this thing. It's so cool. I'm like, no, but, just give me the practical effects. I would have loved to seen, if this was a practical suit, which would have been obviously harder to do, I would have loved to see what that looked like. A physical Sauron would have looked badass, and Blastar. Because the drone robots look cool. Like, they look like low-rent Cybermen. I was totally cool with that. I was like, oh, these are like Cybermen that are getting and so many blasts to the face.
Yes!
Like,
yes!
We could just blast these robots in the face because they're robots.
Yeah, the thing is, you would think they would be shooting for the chest pieces because they're all glowing,
nope.
and that's
headshots.
And that's what we're shooting at. No, it's fucking headshots left and right. It's wild. But yeah, so I think the three of us are on the same page. I got no beef with the CGI and everything, but if it's your first time watching it, and you're watching it based on this discussion, just a heads up. That's all. But
be easy on it. Be easy.
You'll have fun with it. Zach, you want to take us into episode 14, Judgment?
Yes, not to be confused with Judgment Night, Judgment at Nuremberg,
Judgment Day.
Yeah, so Judgment is an interesting episode. It's probably one of the most revealing episodes of all. I will read the IMDb synopsis.
Again, I'm sorry.
No, it's not that bad, but I'm just like, I guess it gets the point. Power has been injured and Pilot goes in search of help in a nearby settlement, but a young villager recognizes her as part of the Dread Youth that torched his hometown, and Pilot is put on trial. So yeah, that is basically the gist of it. Sauron, so Pilot and Power are in a light cycle kind of thing, light ship, and they're battling Sauron in the sky. The two not hit each other. Well, Sauron hits Power's ship. It goes down. It's like a light motorcycle. Think of the ships that He-Man and Tila would fly.
I think they call them sky cycles. I think they were called
sky cycles, really, like a sky sled, right? It looks like a sky sled, actually. They go down in like this desert, basically. Power's leg is broken, and Chase/Pilot goes for help. Sauron goes down, and Blastar is made to come in to clean up the mess, basically. And Pilot stumbles upon this town. This little Canadian kid recognizes her and starts freaking out. He's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
He was the one thing that drew me away from this episode,
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh god, they're giving this kid way too much screen time because his uncle, his counterpart, is way better as an actor. Anyways, she's put on trial because he's like convinced that she was the one that torched his town. Not just torched, but killed everyone in the town, basically. Slaughtered his family. The interesting thing about this episode is it features the cigarette smoking man from the X-Files, played by William B. Davis. William B. Davis, I think everybody knows him as a cigarette smoking man. Well, he's a really talented actor, and it was nice to see him play, against type, so to speak. It was almost like seeing the tall man, Angus Scrimm, outside of playing the tall man. I'm like, oh, you mean he can play more than just one character? Yeah.
Like in Chopping Mall?
Yeah, exactly. And you see the cigarette smoking man's teeth for once. He smiles. Yeah. He has like full teeth smile. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Anyways, Chase is put on trial for her crimes against Nuremberg, Germany. She's basically a Hitler Youth. And a lot of this is told in flashback. She joined the Youth when she was young. She gives her whole backstory of why she left. I don't want to spoil too much because I think everybody should watch this. It's a good episode. Power is able to recover just enough to help kind of save Chase and / Pilot and the town when they need it most, because Blastar comes in to just wreak havoc on this town and blast everything. And that's the gist of the episode. It's really the backstory of revealing that Pilot / Chase was a Dread youth. She was a villain at one point, and she has a very dramatic reveal of why she is no longer in the Youth. So that's the episode. I thought it was really good. It's not a good gateway episode for a young person to watch because but it's a great episode to kind of pick up on backstory. It's nice to see I love backstory episodes. I loved in He-Man when you find out that Teela is Man-at-Arm's daughter, through adoption, Sorceress's daughter, purely, and shit like that. I love when you find out these backstories of these characters. You're like, oh, it just gives so much more depth. And she obviously, as we're going to find out in a little bit, is the main, she's the main focus of this show, really, if you think about it. The main true hero.
I think so. Diallo, what were your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, no, it was a good episode, kind of framed. They actually touch a little bit on her past in a few episodes before that.
Cool.
The episode's called Gemini and Counting, and I think she has to sneak into a base and she wears her old Hitler Youth uniform.
That's what it is.
She confronts, there's a young girl that's in the group that is very angry. So it's kind of like, this was me when I was back there. And that was the first time I realized that she had been a part of, Dredd's little party he had going on over there. And then they expand upon it in the episode you just covered. And they talk about it a little
interesting.
bit more, a little bit later.
So they did touch upon it before.
Yeah, it was really.
But this is more of like her crimes against humanity.
They actually in this episode they actually showed what happened. In that episode, you saw that that's what she had been in the past, but we didn't really get any details. We just kind of knew she escaped. You kind of filled in the blanks, and then they actually fill in more for you later. So they did a good job of giving everybody at some point had backstory. Hers was probably the most fleshed out, though. Hers and Captain Powers.
And I like the reveal of another character, like the other character's responsibility, or in the torching of this town, like how Dredd and his army came upon this town to begin with. That reveal at the end was pretty cool. We're like, whoa, okay, there's more to the story.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things about the show is it's like there was always like this little character twist or something at the end that always was just, it made it a little bit different than what you thought it was going to be. Even in the episode that I discussed, it was like Athena turns on Captain Power, but she does it because of a different reason than it looks like on the surface. And
Yeah.
so it's not just kind of like a straightforward thing that you would expect from a quote unquote kids show.
I was watching this episode, and I didn't watch every episode like Diallo did, so I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh, wow. I didn't realize that there was this Dread Youth thing. In fact, I didn't even remember that there were human enemy soldiers. I only remembered the robotic enemy soldiers. I didn't even realize that there were any humans in my head. Like, if you asked me yesterday, I would have been like, I think Lord Dread's the only human there, but no, that's not the case. And I actually found that to be very interesting. So a couple of thoughts. I thought this episode was very cool. Same reason both you all do. I like backstory episodes. I like knowing more about the characters, especially since Pilot is probably one of the more interesting characters on the entire show. Death count on this episode was crazy high. Totally. I was like, holy shit. I liked how Blastar and Sauron kind of like butt heads and have their own personalities and kind of seem to be sort of sentient on their own. But my biggest takeaway, and Zach, I know you didn't want to spoil it, but I have to sort of make my point. So at her tribunal, at Pilot's tribunal, for her crimes against Sandtown, the unfortunately named Sandtown, basically she tells her story about how she grew up in the Dread Youth, and she was kind of brainwashed. She didn't know any other way and everything. And in fact, this was her first sort of engagement where they had to perform this atrocity, and she was like, and it shook her, and she was like, oh my God, I can't do this. And so that was kind of like a turning point for her to kind of move against the Dread Army and everything. So I'm like, that origin story sounds pretty fucking familiar to me. Sounds to me like Finn's origin story in The Force Awakens. So I was like, let me just confirm this. So I literally, I told Myra, I didn't set it up. I didn't prep it. I didn't say shit.
Wow.
I just told her Pilot's origin story, and she looked at me, she goes, so Finn. And I was like, thank you. Exactly. J.J. Abrams ripped the fuck off of Pilot's origin story.
Yeah, Sandtown, flame torched everything.
Yep. And then she was shook. It was her first engagement. She was brainwashed. I was like, holy fucking shit. And that's when I texted you guys. I was like, this show's too deep. This show's deeper than it has any right to be, So I was like, oh my fucking God. So yeah, Pilot. Pilot is the inspiration, I believe, for Finn from The Force Awakens.
Well, that sequence of what happens in The Force Awakens,
exactly the same.
Totally what happened. It's exactly the same.
Exactly the fucking same. I was like,
yep,
wow.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Wait,
so,
what sequence of Force Awakens?
The opening sequence, just Finn, Finn not wanting to shoot on everybody, and then the fact that the fact that he was a conscript, she seemed to be possibly some kind of a conscript type of thing, where she's brainwashed from youth. Finn was brainwashed from youth to be a stormtrooper. Her first engagement was this. His first engagement was the beginning of The Force Awakens. She saw
they torched the Sandtown
and shot everybody. She didn't like that. It shook her to her core. It shook Finn to his core when he saw everyone get executed at the beginning of Force Awakens. It literally is the exact same origin story.
Man, if we only got what happened to Pilot to Finn, it would have been a better.
Yep.
Well, probably should. Maybe that was the original idea, but then.
No, well, we have to have franchise.
No,
we can't.
No, the original idea was to make Finn a Jedi, and that didn't fucking work out because they kowtowed to China. So, fuck Disney.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So, otherwise, though. I thought this was a great episode. Zach, you said it correctly. It's not a good one to show someone for the first time, but it's a perfect episode in the middle to sort of give sort of a character development and everything.
Yeah, I mean, every season has that one episode that kind of drifts a little bit, and I obviously didn't watch the entire season like you did, Diallo, but this feels like this one drifts a little bit from the typical routine of the show, but in a good way. Obviously it's building something that builds more more depth to a character that we're gonna. Well, Corey, you'll tee it up.
Well, I'm just real quick. I think this, it's sort of like the first half of the series kind of was that standard, kind of what I talked about in my episode. It just were like these standalone deals, but right around the middle of it, it started to get a little bit, started to dig a little deeper and get a little bit more creative. There were some episodes that dealt with backstories. There was Hawk had an old comrade from back in the day that appears or at least her name appears in a later episode. But the episode right after what you did, Zach, the very next episode was a two-parter that was all about Captain Power's origins and like the origins of the suits and all that other stuff, and like how the the base got there. And it was like maybe like 85% flashback. But again, framed in this really kind of almost beautiful story in the present. So it was actually, again, done really well. But yeah, it started to kind of get into a little different mode around that, in that back half of the show.
And Diallo, before I jump into the finale, do you want to talk about the Scout origin episodes and anything else episode-wise in between, before the finale and everything that you want to bring up or discuss?
Well, it wasn't like there wasn't an origin episode for Scout. I just noticed. I didn't want to get all racial, but I noticed how, just casually watching, how much it was like, oh, so okay, I found out a little bit about Tank. I found out a little bit about Hawk. I'm finding out about Pilot, and then I found out about Captain Power. But I was like, yeah, Scout, he was like mostly in the background for most of the show, and I just was kind of wondering like what was his deal. And because he's the only person of color in the entire show, I was kind of like, what's going on? And then finally in the finale, there's it was really heartfelt, and he got about as much, at least, to talk about as Tank did, even though that episode was more around Tank's past. But at least he gave a story about himself and his mother and why he doesn't like Christmas trees. It was really like a sad, beautiful story that he told. Yeah. Acted really well. But yeah, I just, that's kind of what I brought up. And Pilot also, I feel like, because I think you brought up a little bit earlier about when did she start wearing a helmet.
Yeah, when did her helmet change? Because she originally had like kind of goggles-ish stuff, but then she had her ponytail. I liked her original head design better than the helmet. Maybe it's just the helmet was kind of lame, I thought. When did they add that?
So it just kind of showed up. Like there was no story or thing around it. I do think I think it might be around Eden Road. It was like kind of towards the back half. It's like maybe 5 episodes ago that all of a sudden she just has the helmet. And I noticed, just because, when I'm watching stuff, I start to think like sociologically and all this other stuff. And so I'm looking at all the Captain Power soldiers, and they all have traditional armor, traditional helmets, but then she has like a ponytail, right? And so I felt like it was a little whatever. I don't know. I don't want to use the word sexist, but it's kind of like it was in that realm. And I kind of like noticed the same thing with Scout, just because he's the only person of color. So it's almost like they're being put in this weird category because it's being created by people that don't look like them.
Yeah. So, and also, to kind of go to the sexist, not sexist thing, going back to Force Awakens, look at Captain Phasma, played by Gwendolyn Christie. Mm-hmm. Her chest armor doesn't have any breasts. The Captain Phasma doesn't. Mm-hmm. And that's a design aesthetic that we've kind of adopted, recently, and I think it's appropriate, because I don't think it's probably good armor to have chest, like molded breasts. But pilot, her armor also has like these molded breasts, quite large, in fact. But it's just like it's of the time, and is it right? No. Is it practical? No. Should she be wearing a helmet? Yes. Is the helmet design kind of crappy? Yeah, sadly, unfortunately, kind of generic.
And I feel like to me they fixed that, because I actually kind of noticed it a little earlier, and I was like, oh, she's the only one that's not wearing a helmet, and it seemed impractical to me, actually, if you're going into battle. So she, all of a sudden, she just was wearing a helmet, and at least I felt like they were treating her like she was one of the soldiers. So I mean, that, again, those are all just like kind of like subtle production things that happen with creators, because you just don't quite like, like I whenever I encounter black characters in comic books made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they all tend to have like certain traits that aren't, because they're not made by actually black people. So it's sort of like, this is how I see this group, and then that's how they're made. Just like that episode, Scout he barely had anything to do, except for one episode there was like a black woman in the episode, and all of a sudden he was like, hey.
And the irony is, like, his power, his infiltration, where has this basically he can, I guess, project like this hologram projection over himself to look like anybody, so he can sneak in and everything. He's one of the most useful characters on the show, and so when he does get a lot of action, but just not a lot of story, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think when so I don't quote me on it, but I think whenever J. Michael Straczynski wrote episodes, he would tend to have a little bit more to do. And I know that in that finale, it was almost like he came to life again, because he hadn't really done anything, and all of a sudden he was like kind of front and center, not just with like that little bit of the backstory, but he just was a little bit more integral in like the plot and developments and stuff. So it's not to say like Tank kind of was like in the background a lot too. So I'm not saying, that it was like wasn't equal, but it just like he didn't get any character development until the second to the last episode. That was the first time we found out anything about him.
And as much as I love LaForce, we have to admit Maurice Dean Wint is a better actor than Sven-Ole Thorsen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to go into it, but that story he tells about the Christmas tree is just, I mean, that's like tour de force acting. That's one of the things I watching all of these episodes, man, I was just so impressed by how earnest everybody was. Like it's like they took everything seriously, and there was no like tongue-in-cheekness about it, and they all were like just like thespians. Even like
really
David
talented.
Himblett, he was like sitting up there as Lord Dredd, and just like he had this this British accent that was coming out. He sounded like Baltar from the original Battlestar a lot of times. He sat up there like Baltar. It looked like him.
Oh yeah,
a lot of vibes of Baltar, and I was very happy to see Lord Dredd up and about and moving a bit more in the finale than at the beginning of the show. I do have to ask Diallo, because since I didn't watch, obviously the whole series you did, it seems so. The finale, before I get into it, it seems that Captain Power dealt a blow to Lord Dredd right before it. So can you?
Oh yes.
So can you tee up? I believe it's probably that two-parter that happens right before the finale two-part. The finale is called Retribution Part 1 and 2, but the penultimate episodes, 19 and 20, are called New World Order Part 1 and 2. Diallo, can you? Because it seems like stuff that happened in there happens. The ramifications are in here. Can you set up what happened in those two episodes kind of quickly?
Yeah, watching Retribution again, like knowing what was coming, made it even more heart-wrenching to watch, because the two episodes before those two-parters it was like a big win. So basically they found out information about this thing called Project, I'm going to look up real quick, Project New Order, and it was like a sky platform. It was like a digitizer that was in space that would be able to like digitize. So they just launched this all-out offensive, and like they got all the leaders of all the groups that they had met over the course of the show, and there were some shenanigans that went along with it. Some like kind of traps were set, but anyways, Pilot had to fly into the Volcanium or whatever it was called. It's kind of like Star Wars. Actually, a little, it mirrors the in sequence of the show, where she's like kind of, she has to fire a proton torpedo right into the vents or something, and she only had one chance to do it, and she does it, she lands in there, they end up blowing up the whole base, and it was victorious. It was really satisfying to watch, because like the whole show they just were always struggling, right? So it was like a big win, and they could have ended the show there, actually. And then, the next episode's called Retribution. So that the stuff that you're seeing in those episodes is because of that. So
okay,
because it was like they destroyed their base and all that other stuff. So they're like, we gotta get them back. And,
okay, that's what I figured. That's sort of what it seemed to me, that there was stuff happening prior. I just didn't have a chance to watch the episodes prior before recording this.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of tees up where the gang is in Retribution parts 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll actually just, because I'm going to talk about them as a whole, so I'll just read the 2 IMDb descriptions back to back and then just kind of give you an overview. In part 1, Dredd decides to put all his power into destroying power. Wow. Dredd decides to put all his power into destroying Capital Power in his resistance group. Thanks to Blastar, he finds out Power's jump ship has teleportation capabilities, and Sauron helps him to install a tracking device with which to locate Power's base. This one's also a little wonky. Good old IMDb. Part 2, Lord Dredd is about to have his mind transferred into a new machine body. But first, he delivers his final strike against Captain Power. Blastar and his troops attack the jump ship and prevent it from entering a teleportation gate by breaching it themselves. The machine forces overrun the Power base, manned only by Pilot, as Power and the others remain helpless on the outside. So, this is a Christmas episode, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, we can talk about this one again at Christmas time.
Exactly. So, and it kind of starts with, Captain Power clearly feeling a bit uneasy, but everyone else kind of feeling happy about the win that they just had. It's Christmas. They're celebrating some things. We get this great moment by Scout kind of talking about how, he tried to make a Christmas tree with his mom, and she just kind of cried, and he sort of didn't understand the meaning behind it, but now he kind of gets it and everything. We get some nice dance stuff and everything, and we kind of get the culmination of, Captain Power and Pilot's sort of star-crossed, romance and everything, how there's never quite time for it, things are going to go bad when they get called out on a mission, and Pilot's like, I have something I want to tell you. Captain Power's like, well, we can't talk about it now. And she's like, okay, we'll talk about it when I get back, type of thing. You're like, okay, here it goes. So they have like a sort of a nothing mission. And at the same time, Lord Dredd, he's kind of recovering from his attacks and everything, from the attacks from Captain Power. And he's setting up this new plan. As Captain Power does this mission, they're getting ready to leave. Blastar's trying to follow them, but he gets shot down. I like how Lord Dredd was like taking over Blastar's abilities, and he's like, you will rise. And Blastar's like, Rah! It's like, again, I know, the CGI is what it is, but they put a lot of personality into Sauron and Blastar, and these are 100% fully CGI characters, and I think they do a damn good job for 1987, just giving them personalities and everything. Because of so Blastar is able to sort of look up, and he sees that Captain Power and his group, they use a jump tunnel type of thing. It's almost like a wormhole that gets generated, so they can go to their hidden base that Lord Dredd could never figure out where the fuck it was. But now he's like, oh shit, they got a jump tunnel. We can use this. We can figure this out. So he outfits Sauron with a device, a MacGuffin, to allow him to basically, and I love all this. I love it's like frequencies of the teleportation and like what is that frequency and stuff like that. Like, and this is, by the way, this, like Diallo said, these 2 episodes are written by J. Michael Straczynski, so it feels like there's a lot of thought involved. And just the thought of the teleportation tunnel itself and how Lord Dredd, conceives of a way to, follow them. He's like, okay, now that I know it, he sends Sauron up to it, and then, they get Captain Power to come out on another mission. And then while they're out there, they send Sauron sort of invisible up there to kind of damage the ship and everything, to make Captain Power and his team jump back to their base. But Sauron gets their code, and that's sort of how the episode ends, because like Lord Dredd's like, I have it, I have the code, Next episode, they Captain Power and this team go out on another mission, and they get separated. They can't jump back. Their ship gets damaged. It goes down. It's actually, they meet up with this guy called Cypher and everything, but it's kind of, it doesn't matter as much. It's a trap. It's a trap by Lord Dredd. That's really all that matters.
Cypher was in some episodes previous, and they got some information from him. So the fact that it was a trap this time was like oh no, like he betrayed them. So.
And he had a cool cyberpunk look to him and everything. I enjoyed his look and whatnot. But honestly, what it all culminates to is what we all care about the most. Captain Power and his team, sans pilot, get shot down so they can't go back. Blastar and a small group of his soldiers go through the teleportation back to Power Base. Captain Power has to let Pilot know. She kind of already knows. He tells her to blow the base. She says, I want to make a backup of the mainframe computer that, the character that they kind of talk to. I think it's Captain Power's dad. Like, it looks like Captain Power's dad. But it's their main kind of computer. She wants to make a backup and also grab some suits. Some, backup suits as well. So, she sets the self-destruct sequence to like 4 minutes. Captain Power has a little bit of a battle on his end, try to get back to her. They get back in the air. The self-destruct sequence gets stopped by Blastar. So the self-destruct sequence is over with. It's not going to explode. She sends the backup memory unit of the computer, Captain Power's dad. She also sends the backup suits out on one of those sky jet car things, like remote flying. And Pilot stays behind and single-handedly kind of holds off the bad guys, Blastar and everything like that. She gets fucking nailed. She even says like her insides are fucked up, like she's dead. She knows she's gonna die. Captain Power's calling her like, we're almost there, we're gonna get there. She's like, no, you're not gonna make it. And she self-destructs Power Base, destroying it, presumably destroying Blastar, but not allowing Lord Dredd to get any of the information and everything on them. It's heroic. Even just watching these episodes, like, with giant chunks in between, I can safely say that Pilot is one of the best characters on the show. I think she is the hero of the show. And I think they did a good job of just not making her female. Like, by the end of the show, I think they did a good job of just not making her female eye candy, but actually giving her like a lot of meat to work with and things to like actually do. And this finale was burned into my brain. I don't know when I watched it. I don't, watching these episodes, I don't feel like I've actually seen a lot of Captain Power, to be honest with you. But I remember this. And more so, I remember talking to people about it, like Luke and whatnot, like at school. I'm like, Captain Power? Like, fucking Pilot died? Like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was mind-blowing. And if this is where the show ends, and this is where the show ends because there isn't more, even though a script for season 2 was pretty much, like, scripts for season 2 were pretty much ready to go, and it was going to deal with Captain Power's fallout of this, like, lost love and everything like that. And I think they were actually going to bring in a love interest for Sven Thorsen, of course not for Scout, right? Bringing it for the old man. But this ending was unbelievable. Like, even now I'm watching them, it's like she gets fucked up, but she's still the hero and she fucks them back. I'm like, Pilot's my favorite character on the whole show. I think she's fantastic, and she had a hero's death. She went out like a hero, and I was like, this is fucking awesome. So, loved this 2-part finale, but I do feel, kind of like my last thought on it, I do feel that I was missing part of it, and the part that I was missing was the 2-parter penultimate prior to it. So, guys and gals, if you don't envision yourself watching the entire series but want to watch the finale, I would recommend watching the 2-part penultimate right before it, because I do think it'll set the stakes up better for or at least the understanding of what's happening here. So, Zach, the finale, what do you think?
Well, I echo all your sentiments. It's very rare, if not never, has happened where there's a kid show where one of the main characters gets killed at the end, and especially it being a female character, making it a female-centric episode where she's the hero, and I think that's, a little off-brand from the 80s, I think, so to speak, when the main hero as Captain Power is supposed to save the day, and he doesn't. So that's very dark stuff and heavy stuff to deal with, and so I think kids watching this way back when would be left like you were, with a lot of, unanswered questions and wanting to know why. I was 11 at the time, so I think I was like more, this is cool, I'm shocked, but like, whoa, what's going to happen next? When a character dies in a show, a la Optimus Prime, I didn't want to play with the toy anymore, because I'm like, the character's dead. He's dead. I can't bring him back. I don't know how to do that. My brain didn't work that way, I was like, he's gone. I can't world build outside of that. I liked the little robot that Lord Dredd was interacting with.
One of my notes here was that one. Yeah, I liked him too.
It's not a CGI robot, which actually makes me love it even more, because it's a practical effects character, and it's cool looking, and maybe they spent $1 million on that one. Who knows? The Blastar and Sauron, I world build that these were humans that they were put into robots. That's where I would go with that.
You're not
because
far
they're so.
off.
Okay,
You're
cool.
not.
Do they have Diallo? Sorry, Zach. Diallo. Do they have backstories for Blastar and Sauron?
So they have a backstory for what they are.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll let Zach finish, and I'll talk a little bit.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Yeah. So really quickly, I always, felt like that's where I went with them. I was like, they're more than just machines, right? I liked obviously Scout's, sad story about Christmas is a great opportunity for him to show a side that you want to see with your characters, but then they just drop it at that. I'm like, maybe this whole episode should have been about Scout, and not about Pilot, because that would have kind of made more sense. They felt like they were dealing with so many storylines in this 2-parter where they could have gone either way. They could have made it more about him, and that would have been fine too. And then I'm like, wow, Captain Power's really towering over Scout. It makes her look like a little child when he's like...
Oh, Pilot, you mean?
Or sorry, over Scout. No. I'm like, wow, Captain Power is really towering over Pilot. This is a little uncomfortable for me, because he looks like... It's a little weird that he's so tall.
He was tall. He was.
In love with her.
He was taller than everybody. I noticed.
He's huge.
He was a tall, huge
guy.
He towered over a tank. And I was like,
over Tank. For the show to wrap up in this way, it's bittersweet, because you want to see it go on and you want to see it have a finale. While we were, getting ready to record and recording, I sent a message, an image to both Diallo and Corey. There was a comic book that came out in '88, and it didn't really move forward past that. I had that comic. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately, but I'm sure you can acquire it on eBay or whatever. I'd be curious to see if they build a bigger story from this, but I don't think they did. That's my final thoughts on this episode. On the series will wrap up as well, but I'll wrap up my final thoughts in a minute. But Diallo, you've got a lot of insight. What's your insight into this episode?
Yeah, I mean, like I said a little bit before, that sort of back half of the show, all kind of like there was like a shift in the storytelling, and there were like more hints of a connected story arc. It wasn't like super strong, but there were like little pieces. So it actually makes sense to watch the last 4 episodes. It almost forms like a movie or whatever. Yeah, and and then before the 2-part episode that I was referring to, A Summoning of Thunder, that's the 2-part episodes where they have the backstory about like Captain Power and everything. So it goes back, and I think it was like 15 years before, and it showed like they were building the base. His father's there. It was like there were like tons of people in the base at the time, and they were basically giving you all the things that you needed to know about how, like, why things are the way they are now. So they wanted to keep the base secret. Captain Power was training. He was like a younger actor. He was training to like fight. Hawk was sort of like his mentor that was there. So it was like Hawk and Captain Power and his dad, but the rest of them weren't there yet. Captain Power gets captured, ends up, and then his dad ends up going to try to save him. And while Hawk is still at the headquarters, I forget exactly how it happens, but that's when the hologram shows up with the dad. He's like, his dad programmed it with his memories so that John will never be alone if he goes away. And then he shows him this wall with all the suits in it. And so Hawk's the first one to ever actually activate a suit. And it's like a big, I don't know what's going to happen. They're not tested yet. And he does it. And anyways, he goes in and saves the day. But yeah, so those Dredd and Captain Power's dad used to be like partners. And there was going to be like, I think it was right before the war. And the dad wanted to use the machines to like to stop wars forever. But Dredd, I forget his name. He actually has a name. Merged his mind with the Overmind, and that's why he, that kind of became what he was. He gets injured in this episode, and that's why he has the way, like, looks like Darth Vader / Baltar now. But anyway, I think it's in that episode they talk about it, where that's when they show Sauron being created, and he makes a note about it's like the merging of DNA with machines. And so that's the first machine that I think can like be sort of like autonomous, because of the rest of them were robots. So, and then they show Blastar being created a little, like Blastar's not from the start, and he gets created a little bit later, the 6th or 7th episode, and it's kind of like the same deal. So anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying that.
By the way, you when you were saying that Dredd, and thank you for putting all that in, because that's great context. When you're saying Dredd looks a little bit like those two characters, he also looks like Sid Haig from Jason of Star Command.
Oh yes! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Which I believe for me was the last live action like science fiction series that I watched as a kid that was Saturday morning related.
You saying that, because like when I was watching the show, like I had kind of like, it was, to me it was like a, you already said Doctor Who, which like I felt I was getting Doctor Who vibes, but I was getting, there was a show called Arc 2 back in like the 70s, and yeah, Jason of Star Command, like all those live action shows from like the mid to late 70s that were on Saturday mornings. And yeah, I definitely, it was like a merging of all of those, and like a strange vibe. Partly why I don't think it lasted, but also why it was cool.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. They just didn't quite get the right vibe. But anyways, if anybody out there is watching, I actually recommend that you watch like at least those 6 episodes. Actually, there's a few in there that kind of like the episode Zach covered. There's an episode, I think it's called Eden Road, that was pretty interesting. They do a lot of building of the characters and stories. There's one where they go to like this super cyberpunk city, and it's like very much like this is 1987. So I don't want it. William Gibson. What's the neuromancer?
Yeah,
Johnny Mnemonic.
Yeah, Johnny Mnemonic, and all the
yeah.
neuromancer stuff, all that tech
Yeah.
noir and cyberpunk shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was an episode where Captain Power like gets jacked into a system, and it's like, I mean, it was like 87 before like all of these concepts were like really like well known as they are. So that was pretty interesting. Also, it was like a little bit of ahead of its time in that regard. It was basically like the basic concepts of like the Matrix, you know. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting show, and that finale was just, man, my heart. I didn't want to watch it actually because like I knew what was gonna happen, and then when I was watching it, like it was even worse than I remembered because I didn't really remember the circumstances or anything. I remember she died, but I didn't know how, and it was just like watching how they set everything up, like in the episode before where they were all dancing and happy, and I was just like, oh.
Well, and the fact that Captain Power's like, we'll be there in a second, just, basically live. And she's like, I'm broken inside. Like, she says something to that regard for kids. But as well as we all know, like, her ribs are probably broken, like, her fucking stomach's like, she got shot by Blastar, like, multiple times.
Yeah.
And it, like, sapped her power and everything. But, like, just those words. And she had a little bit of blood coming out of her mouth. But what they're trying to say. She's dead. She knew she was dead. And that's what I was like, that's what was kind of gut-wrenching, that there was no saving her whatsoever.
Well, and the fact that he sent her back in the first place alone, and the protocols were to do what she did, but he was like, he told her from jump, like,
save yourself.
Save yourself before anything happened. And she was like, no, these are the protocols. I gotta do them. So that after it was all done and he's standing there and he's just like, I told her to save herself. And it's just like, you see how much he cared because he forgot about all the rules in that instance. He just wanted to save her. I think the complexity of it was like, it was just really well done.
And I love that it wasn't all for naught, because they received the Skyjet with the bag of, backup suits, secondary suits, and which I'm sure they were going to design into maybe new suits, to show or whatever. But, in season 2. And they got the backup, CPU for the his dad, basically, So she did everything. And that's when I was like, my realization after all of this, and I am absolutely going to watch the show now. I just can't watch it before going to bed. Otherwise, I'll just, fall over the floor and have an epileptic seizure. But, I realized at the end of this that she was the fucking hero of the show the entire time. And that Judgment episode, the only reason we picked it was because it was so highly rated on IMDb. And then it also turns out to be an episode based on her.
Yeah.
And then even when they were showing, flashbacks of them, they were showing flashbacks from that episode as well. And I was like, I think that was obviously a very, very pivotal episode for her character, but I think even the writers or the editor or whatever was like, this was a good episode. You guys need to remember this one. And it's, again, Zach, you said it as well. It's off brand for the 80s to make the female character this we've seen strong characters in the 80s. Yes, Ripley. Yes, Sarah Connor and stuff like that. I mean, you guys understand what I'm saying. It wasn't the norm, though. Especially not in a TV show, to make them this strong and this much of a hero.
Well, it's interesting because I think of strong female characters in science fiction series, and I think of like Wilma in Buck Rogers, right? And my favorite episode is the one where she is possessed by the vampire, and she kind of ends up saving the day in that, so to speak, too. Not totally. It's been a while since I've seen it, so it's a little foggy. We might have to do a Buck Rogers episode, like talking.
Might have to.
Yeah, like just Buck Rogers,
down.
just Buck Rogers.
That is one of my all-time favorite shows.
And I'm calling out the vampire one as my favorite one. Right now. Just stating fact. But that's an example of like the female character getting the spotlight in the episode. But this is the finale, so this is this is the end of the series. Whether this was, the official finale, I think what didn't typically shows would go 52 episodes way back when for a whole season. So maybe this goes 30 or something. I don't know. But for this to be the final episode, for us to be the final memory of this show, that's pretty powerful stuff. So rest in peace, Pilot/Chase.
Yeah, and can I call out sort of, in a comparison? So like Denise Crosby's, death in Star Trek Next Generation, Tasha Yar, was so unceremonious compared to this death, and I think that kind of is like, I think that's what makes this Captain Power episode stand out, because her death was meaningful, whereas, Denise Crosby's death on Star Trek The Next Generation it felt like just another episode, and then she just happened to die. I remember that episode. I remember her dying very vividly, because I liked her character a lot on Star Trek Next Generation, and TNG was my Star Trek, so I love Tasha Yar. But, I think this was a better death than she had.
Agreed.
I mean, by far. Like, yeah. By the way, my favorite Buck Rogers episode is the two-parter with Jack Palance.
All right, you're calling it right now.
Khalil.
Guys and gals, I mean, I loved Battlestar Galactica as a kid, but I watched a lot of Buck Rogers too. So you heard it here. We'll tackle that at some point as well.
They actually have a song for it, like with words.
I don't know.
Yeah, they do.
Cool.
I'm telling you, they do.
All right, cool.
Yeah, it's super cheesy. Anyways, sorry, this is not the Buck Rogers, but I just got excited.
It will be. It will be one day.
It's my fault.
So, Zach, what are your final thoughts on the series, and also Bodhi's thoughts and any other family members' thoughts?
Final thoughts. Quickly, Bodhi was not a huge fan, and I get it. It's too much. It's too much. Too much dramatic backstory and characters that he was not familiar with, and I think we watched it for Saturday morning cartoons, and he just wasn't feeling it. He liked the practical stuff. He thought was cool, the sets and everything. He thought was neat, and the suits were cool. He liked that. I don't think he cared for the drama. I also think it's we talked about this. That's not the age demographic that clearly this show is for an older audience.
And I can corroborate that. I showed it to my nephew, the first episode, a few months back, maybe 6 months back at this point, and he's only about a year and a half younger than Bodhi, and yeah, it didn't hit with him at all. So,
but I will say, this my kid that used to be my kindergarten student, now he's 16, which has tripped me out. Watched it with us, and he was super into it. He thought it was really cool. So this generation right now, there's hope for him yet. My final thought is it's a damn good show, and it didn't get its due diligence, and I'm glad we paid it a tribute.
Zach, do you have the DVD box set too?
I do. I don't have that sweet slipcover that you have, but I do have the box set, and it does have a documentary on it as well, so I'm curious to watch the documentary. It's a 25th anniversary edition.
Is the cover the same? Is it the Drew Struzman
yes.
cover? Okay.
It is,
mine's just a little bit different.
Yeah, it is the same Drew Struzman cover art, but the quality of the episodes is not so great. It looks like it was copied off a VHS tape, which is fine. it's neither here nor there, and I think it's available on YouTube as well. You can watch all the episodes.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I have the DVD set as well. Yeah, quality's not great, especially when you're watching it on like a giant TV nowadays, flat screen.
Right.
It was made for a tube TV.
Look, like I do with territory marks on $2 late fee. Sometimes I recommend watching it on a small, like on your phone, because our TVs back then were so small. It's almost better to watch it through that because you're not missing a whole lot. When you're watching on a giant TV, you're like, "Oh, this is rough."
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So yeah, I get it. Diallo, I'll let you finish it out because you watched the entire series. So I'm going to let you have the time to sort of talk about your thoughts on the series as a whole and everything. But I think this was awesome. I think it held up well. I loved it. I absolutely will be watching. Maybe I'll watch an episode every lunch or something, every day for lunch. But it won't take long. 22 episodes, guys and gals, 22 minutes apiece. It's not hard to get through. I think it's worth your time, especially just the episodes that I've seen. I think it's worth your time. I think there's a lot of meat on the bones here to really enjoy, and a lot, very little to not enjoy. The CGI doesn't bother me. If anything, I said it multiple times already, but I'll just kind of reiterate it. They gave a lot of personality to Sauron and Blastar, these CGI characters. Sauron does a lot of stuff, they're doing things, and you got to give them props for that because it just, the technology wasn't quite there. And like Diallo said, the technology almost wasn't even there in the early 2000s either. Like, we're just kind of now living in a time where we get a character like IG-8, 11 or whatever on The Mandalorian, we're a completely CGI character. But I do think a lot of times nowadays they'll kind of make close-up shots be actually a prosthetic or something that they'll build, or something, and then CGI around it. But these were fully 1987, fully realized CGI characters. And you know what? I just say get past it. And I think there's a lot of charm. There's even charm in Sauron and Blastar, I think it's great. So I highly recommend it. I think it's a fantastic show, and I love it. So Diallo, what are your thoughts on the whole, man? I mean, you spent 22 episodes with it. So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, just for a little caveat or whatever, if you're anyone out there is gonna watch it, it's they're all around 22 minutes, but the opening credits are about a minute and a half. And
they're very long.
Yeah, the back credits are about a minute and a half. So, it's really like 19. Like and that's kind of why I was able to actually get through them, because they went through pretty quickly. Like, there was like a break in the middle, and then before you knew it, the episode was over.
Yeah. There's only like one commercial break per episode, and you can tell where it is,
Yeah, it's like right in the middle. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to watch the entire thing because again, I remember the show and it had a certain place in my head, but I was like, I actually want to watch this entire thing, especially because I remember the end, and so I really wanted to see how we got there. And then also knowing that J. Michael Straczynski was involved in writing a lot of the episodes and story editor, executive story editor, I think. I just wanted to I could see his level of thought being put into these scripts that weren't supposed to be anything other than just a vehicle for toys. And he ended up creating something that I thought, it went deeper, when I was watching towards the beginning, I was texting you guys, I was like, whoa, this show's pretty dark. There was a scene where they're threatening to kill all these people. It's like a tank's gonna have a fight to the death. I'm like, geez, this is like a kid show. And there was that little clip that I think they used this Challenger explosion.
Yes. No, they did.
They did. Yeah.
Because that was 86, so that tracks.
Yeah. I was like, wow. Anyways, but yeah, it was really fun to watch. I could see why it didn't continue. I feel like it it had to commit to a tone, and so the kitty elements that are like kind of on the bigger picture never really jived with the stories that were going on. So I mean, it's called Captain Power, right? I mean, and it's just like, that sounds kind of cheesy, right? The name, just his name, but then the stuff that's going on is like super dramatic, and it just, so it never quite jibed with each other. And there was actually a line in one of the episodes where Captain Power picks a woman up, and she's like, "What's your real name?" And he's like Jonathan Power. She's like, "Oh, that's your real name?"
she's like, "Fuck you."
yeah. So I mean, even like the writers kind of acknowledged that, and I think that they were kind of trying to get away from that stuff too. When Dredd destroys the little robot so that he can get the whatever that device out of it, so that he can use it to find where the warp is. It was very like sinister, and it was like when they introduced that robot, it was like kind of kiddie, and I was surprised when he shows up and then he destroys it, right? So I think that they were actually trying to get away from that stuff where they could, and they kind of acknowledged that it was a little kiddie. I don't know that this is a show that you could do unless you really like do today, unless you really like rethought a few things. I also think that pilot could be brought back easily. And
like for a season 2, I thought that, like, I was like, Blastar digitized her before the explosion, and then beamed the digitization up to a satellite, and then the explosion. I thought the same thing. You could easily bring her back, but at the same time, I was secretly hoping that they never would.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Like, if they brought her back, it would be one of those things where I would if they did a season 2, I wouldn't want them to do it in the first episode, but maybe even like a season 3, she shows up, but there's some kind of like twist so she can't hang out. They also established in the 2-part episode before the finale, because I think they destroyed both. I think they destroyed both Sauron and Blastar, and they could like regrow themselves or something. Yeah. So that was another bit. So like Blastar could have just regrown, and that could have, in the time that it took to regrow, he could have like whatever put the digitized version of her when he fully came back. So I mean, there's just ways they could have done it, but like you said, I like her death being final.
And I want to call it the fact that you mentioned earlier, it kind of changed. Maybe it changed tonally halfway through. Because, like, you said there was a point halfway through where it kind of makes this change. Mm-hmm. And I do want to note real quick that the original air date for the first episode was September 1st, 1987. And they were still filming up till December of 1987. So that allowed them to maybe judge some reactions in September, and then maybe make some alterations in the last half or something.
That makes sense.
Yeah, easily. They kind of went with like some really good character stuff that, and I'm gonna say this, and anyone out there listening, do not conflate what I'm saying or make it. I'm not saying this literally, but there are elements of the drama and character from Battlestar Galactica, the remake, that I can actually see in some of the elements in this show. And I think that's why I think it doesn't work, because some of the things that they're talking about are really complex emotionally, and it doesn't really flow with power on, and armor and, that kind of thing. Because that's more like Centurions, right? So,
right.
Yeah. And
Power extreme.
Yeah. So and that's not me knocking it at all. I just think that that's kind of why I think it might not have really connected. Because when you watch it, you're kind of like, I don't know where to put this in my brain. Am I supposed to like the action, or am I supposed to like the two lovers coming back together, and whatever. So anyway, I thought it was a great show. I'm glad I watched the entire thing. I can't wait to watch the entire Buck Rogers series. That was my show, man. Oh my god.
How many seasons was Buck Rogers?
2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not too bad. Okay, it's not like a 5
Yeah.
or 6
And
series.
I don't even think that the second season was like a full. I
Okay.
don't think was a full season. I think it got canceled before.
In my head, it was on for like 5 years, but that was probably
Yeah,
just
right.
reruns and syndication.
Reruns, yeah.
You know.
That was like the original Battlestar Galactica. That was always the thing. It was only on for 1 season, but it felt like it was on for years.
Yeah.
It only ran 32 episodes. So
Okay.
Buck Rogers.
yeah,
Wow.
season 1 was 21 episodes. Season 2 was 11.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait for Buck Rogers. I had a massive crush on Aaron Gray as a kid.
Oh man, you were not the only one.
I don't think I was. So I think all around, Captain Power was a winner for all of us, and I'm glad that we took the time, to cover this as a singular episode. Guys and gals, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there, discussing the toys and everything like that. So go check them out. There's a lot of cool stuff around this show, but at the end of the day, as a show, not as a toy vehicle, I recommend it as a show. I think it's a really cool ass show. So I think you can still get the complete series on DVD. I think it's still available. Unlike the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, which all of a sudden was available for forever, and then all of a sudden they make an appearance in a live action movie, and then all of a sudden now it's not available anymore. Hopefully that means they're going to be bringing out a Blu-ray set.
I hope so.
Yeah,
That
I
might have
did
been
too.
that might have had to do with didn't Hasbro or something get the rights? There was some kind of big deal about the game and the rights and stuff. So.
Well, the funny thing is that there's now Dungeons and Dragons, cartoon toys on the shelves as well, and you still can't, you can't get the Dungeons and Dragons DVD set. Sometimes humanity just blows my mind, and the thought process of all of it, and I can't really figure it out. But
Right.
Captain Power, guys and gals, I think we can all three of us recommend go checking this one out, and I think all three of us can recommend go check out Galactica Actually. Diallo, how are things going over there? You enjoying?
That was a great segue.
I still haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try. I try to. I come up with them on the fly, but I
That
try.
was pro style. That was really good.
I might have been doing this for 4 years. I don't know. Diallo, how's Galactica actually doing these days, buddy?
Galactica actually is going really great.
It's actually going really well.
Actually going really well. Yeah. We're in the beginning parts of season 2 right now. We just recorded episode Fragged that features a character called Crashdown. I have some really fun stuff that I'm going to be releasing around that. Some pretty cheesy celebratory things about Crashdown. So follow us on Instagram if you want to see it. It's really funny.
Cool.
Especially if you watch the show, you'll appreciate it. So yeah, my co-host Jamie and I are just kind of going through the show episode by episode and giving our breakdowns and giving insights. And, I always dissect things. So I go on little rants about certain things on each episode. And I've also been watching the old Battlestar just because I started getting really curious about the connections and stuff, and kind of finding similarities that aren't necessarily on the surface, So yeah, that's Galactica actually.
And do we have anything for Angel in the Dark that you can talk about?
Actually, I can actually. So I have been I've been working on it for a while. So Angel in the Dark was a comic book that myself and the co-creator and artist Russell Fox published in 2018. And for the last year, I've always wanted to turn it into something more. We were always looking towards putting it into animation. And in order to get it there, I developed it as a motion comic book. So we took the issue, turned it into motion comic, and we're having it put to music. We have voice actors. There's this one guy you might know that's doing a voice. His name's Zach Schaefer.
Whoa.
Yeah, he's doing the voice of one of the characters, Lomos O'Neill. I got a whole slew of voice actors, and I'm very grateful to have had them, an international group of voice actors. And the big news about all of it is that the theme song for the motion comic for Angela in the Dark is being done, or has been done, by one Murray Gold, who, if you watch the new Doctor Who, you know who he is. He's the composer of Doctor Who. He was and now is again the composer. He left for a few years when Chris Chibnall was the showrunner, but he's just come back. So yeah, he did the theme music for Angela in the Dark. If you sit around to watch it, it'll be in the last few minutes of the episode, and that's really exciting because it's like Murray Gold, and really excited. It should be coming out in a few weeks. Follow us on Angela in the Dark on Instagram to get news and updates. We also have Facebook Angela in the Dark page, and then a YouTube channel that I started for my independent production studio called Forge Creation, where we'll be putting up the video eventually.
Very cool. That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear it, and it looks amazing, by the way.
Yeah, you had help getting it done too. We had titles done, like professional titles done. A lot of it looks really good. So I'm really hoping it's entertaining enough, and we want to help move it towards getting made into actual animation.
Well, we'll have the links in the show notes as always. We'll link specifically to Angela in the Dark's Instagram page and whatnot, so that way you can people can watch that trailer and everything, because it's really freaking awesome. So I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of how that turned out. So good job, buddy. That's awesome. Glad that it's here. Glad it's happening.
As Burt Reynolds says in Boogie Nights, you made a real thing.
You made a real thing. Should have had Stan Bush do some music.
You got the time.
And Zach, you're always making real things over at $2 late fee.
Look at you, segue boy.
How's that things going over there, specifically Territory Marks? Since this is TV Obscura is kind of the Territory Marks of Podcast After Dark, meaning that it's on the feed, but it's a spin-off show and everything. How's that show going? I'm all caught up at this point.
Wait, I don't Zach. I don't want Zach to tell you. Let me tell you.
Please do.
Because I might be the biggest fan of Territory Marks. I am obsessed. I will go to the gym and I will listen to this when I'm like on the treadmill or whatever, and like Zach and Paul London, like the dynamic between the two is great. I love that. Like, Paul is a professional. I'm just gonna take over for you, Zach. Paul is a professional wrestler. I'm so excited about this show. Like I'll text them like, oh my god, like this is so good. But because Paul was a professional wrestler, so his insight into the entire world comes from like this place of like his commentary on like how like these old matches approach things is so great. And then Zach, you all know Zach, and he just like he like Zach just knows stuff, and like the way that he talks about it is just so like I get lost in it, and then they put a context around it of like what came out in that year, which kind of like hammers like your perspective in place about what was going on in the world, like music and that kind of stuff in movies. So I'll let Zach talk about his show. But I had to gush because I
love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I just had territory mark stickers made, so I'll have to get some stickers to you guys. I mean, it's you feel the love in the show.
Yeah.
You're loving it. If you're a wrestling fan, you'll love it. If you're
not a wrestling fan like me, but someone who grew up with tertiary, like wrestling's always been in the periphery with all of my friends. I feel like I'm actually learning something when I listen to those episodes. And Diallo gush, but I will just say my highest compliment that I can give it is that I listen to that show when I can pay attention to it. I never use it as background noise or anything like that because I actually want to hear what they're talking about and understand it. And I love anything where people talk passionately about something they like, even if it's something I don't care about. Like, if you're passionate about manhole covers, I'll listen to an hour and a half of you talking about manhole covers if you're passionate about it. And Zach is definitely passionate about wrestling, especially that era of wrestling, the 80s, 70s, late 70s, 80s, and early 90s era of territory wrestling.
Yeah, I'll give you a tease for the upcoming episode. My match in particular will be one of the most famous rivalries in Texas there ever was in the 80s. So I'll leave it at that. And it might be a featured movie coming out later this year or next year. I'm not sure when that movie's coming out, but more about that when you listen to the episode. I'm very excited to talk about it. It's one of my favorite matches of all time, and it's celebrating its 40th anniversary by the time we drop this episode. So and then the other bit of news we have for $2 late fee, it's the exclusive. This is the first time I've announced it anywhere, but we're going to be releasing episodes every week starting June 18th. You'll, in the intro to the Brian Thompson interview, Brian Thompson of Cobra, you'll hear what's to come. So I think you're all going to like it. It's going to be fun. So we just kind of figured that out today.
And I know that we're working on our next $2 late fee podcast after dark crossover episode. We're trying to figure out when to land it, how to break it down, the format, stuff like that. But maybe next year we can also have a crossover episode with TV Obscura and your Territory Marks, and get Paul London on the show, and maybe we can have a discussion, because I know that you're doing Territory Marks now and everything, but I still want our yearly TV Obscura wrestling thing happening.
That's not changing. That's
good,
not changing.
Good,
and yeah, maybe
good.
we'll get Paul London in here as well to do that. So
that'd be cool.
Be on the lookout. Lots of big things happening for all of us right now. I love it.
Yeah, it really is. And this month, Zach and I are going to be dropping our review of The Village of the Damned on the Carpenter Factor, and we had a lot of fun talking about that one.
We sure did.
Oh, man, it was great seeing Christopher Reeve again, man. Just love that guy so much. But yeah, listen to that review. We got that one going on Patreon. And next month, we have Escape from LA. Oh boy, that's going to be a fun discussion.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's going to be a hot take episode.
Yeah.
Hot take episode.
Yeah.
You got
take.
If you want to sign up to Patreon, if you want to hear our hot takes on Escape from LA, sign up to Patreon now. It's going to be fun.
Or all the other John Carpenter movies in his complete filmography. So if you all don't know, if this is the first time you're listening, Zach and I do a show called The Carpenter Factor. It's under the Auteur de Force tier on Patreon. And we are going through every single episode of every single movie that John Carpenter directed, with one little caveat to the side of that. But we're watching them in order, and it's not a full breakdown like we normally do, but what we're trying to do is look at each film as a part of the greater whole. And, this series is going to take us all the way to the end of the year, and then we are going to tackle another auteur. Right now, we're sort of tossing around the idea of either tackling Don Coscarelli or Wes Craven. So
I thought we were going to do Woody Allen or Roman Polanski.
Of course.
JK, LOL.
But we'll
Speaking
probably,
of manholes.
we'll leave it up to we'll probably leave it up to the viewers, the listeners, which way we go. One day I would love to do a Michael Mann walkthrough as well.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
So we got some great auteurs out there that Zach and I would like to tackle. But right now,
We're about. Let me jump in on Heat and Last of the Mohicans if you ever.
No doubt.
If you do Michael Mann.
Stay alive. I will find you. I saw that in the theater.
Those are two of my top 10 movies of all time. Those
okay.
two
yeah.
I'm a big fan of Heat. Big fan of Manhunter. Big fan. You know what? I like the Miami Vice movie that he did.
Me too.
Collateral. Collateral is another fucking great one. I feel like that one's
yeah.
underrated. No one talks about Collateral really.
Yeah.
I love. Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
Zach's like I got thoughts on all of them.
That was one of the first movies I think shot on HD. I think
it
HD
was.
Camera.
Yep. And it was also. Did they shoot it post L.A. switching over all of the halogen lights, or was it pre that? I knew it had something to do with the lights in L.A.
The lighting, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I do know that that's where Jamie Foxx met his future girlfriend, Katie Holmes.
Oh, yeah.
Who was married to Tom Cruise. Who was married to Tom Cruise at the time.
Oh, Tom Cruise. Oh, my God. So, guys and gals, thank you so much for being on this journey with us. We hope you enjoyed, I was going to say Carpenter Factor, Captain Power. Please, go out and rate and review our show. Go out and rate and review Galactica, actually. $2 late fee. Give everybody a 5-star review. It's a free and easy way to, help the shows grow, or just send episodes to your friends. Be like, you know what, I listened to this awesome wrestling show on $2 late fee. You may like it. Go check it out. Or, oh, I know you're a Battlestar Galactica fan. I love Galactica, actually. Go check this out. So, just share with your friends. It's a great way to help all of our shows grow. So thank you all so much for your love and support on both this show and every other show out there. And as always,
catch you on the Power Obscura side. I was trying to make something that worked.
I'll take it. I'll catch you on the Power Obscura side. You heard it here first, folks.
Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.
Imagine being one of the last people on Earth, being trapped alone with something not human, something always watching, something always waiting. What would you do? Where would you run? Where would you hide if you were haunted for 7 winters alone?
Podcasting After Dark presents 7 Winters Alone, a dystopian haunted house story by David Irons.
Available now in paperback and ebook.